Thank you everyone for coming, hey? Look at this, we're all sitting down, some of us know each other, some of us don't, but we've managed to find our seats and now look at something approximating a stage, which some of us have probably done before. Now, partly this evening is about inviting people to come together, so that it's not just about looking at whoever's on the stage, but it turns out that in order to explain kind of what's going on, attention sort of has to come to a bit of a focal point, and in that case this is happening. My name's Tim. Probably most of you know that because I've been principally the one that's kind of advertised this, although advertising and what this is don't exactly fit together too simply. And we're trying to find out if there's a way that we can gather and get to know each other and build something together that isn't fundamentally built on the kind of relationships that we might find that are usually associated with advertising. This is not a place where you've been invited to come and just consume, just to come and be passive, as though all you were was $41.50 on a chair. Now this is my, dear friend Tyler, and he's travelled over from America, partly for this. And there's definitely more things of value for him here in Australia, but this is a big reason. And so there's quite a lot, for those of you who don't know, that is being brought together here. And the reason this is recorded is not just so my mum can watch it in 20 years' time, although she probably will. Actually, she doesn't listen to the podcast, so I think she prefers me when I was like under 15. So there you go, 30 years old now.
My mother will be watching this.
There you go. Well, that's right. You've, of course, got people back home. And we were going to stream this because there are people in America. Tyler's not a particularly public person, but he is someone who's spoken to many people around the world and is developing projects that share a lot of resonance with Voicecraft, and he's a core part of what Voicecraft is. And so there's a number of people who, I suppose I can say hello to you now. This is a gathering that we are here locally for, but it's also something that is seeking to be in dialogue with many people around the world. Loads of different countries, and all seeking out what it means to gather, what it means to speak, what it means to address ourselves, each other, the world at the moment. And that's partly what we're here to do. What are you here to do? Why are you here?
That was a pretty good description.
Yeah.
So +1 to all of that. But so I guess I would just reframe some of that into the great difficulty that seems to come to us has to do with the momentum that's generated by trying to resolve problems that are in the world. And how it is that we interact, how it is that we partake in the systems that seem to govern much of our lives. And it's often the case that we feel powerless, that we feel like we don't have a voice in this world that is heard by the people that have some effect on the way that we live. So what we're here to do is to explore how it is that we can make sense of things, how it is that we can be heard, that we can give each other the respect necessary for hearing each other, and how it is we can improve, whatever it is that we can improve. It's an exploratory part of this. It's an experimental part of this. There's nothing here that we're broadcasting to you that can't be, in theory, received and improved by yourselves. And we're hoping for that. We're hoping for your participation. So that's why I'm here. I've greatly appreciated Tim's efforts and the projects that he's attempting to manifest. And I see some other faces here that I've come to know over the time that I also deeply respect. And I hope that your voices will be heard. And I hope that you can hear me. I always have such a hard time with microphones. But here we are.
Yeah, beautifully said. So there are a couple things which I thought might be universal enough and deep enough to say, which are valuable about talking to each other. And the first one is that speaking and listening are equally important. So part of the practice, part of what it is to converse well in the principal manner that we're inviting this evening as a kind of essence of developing friendship, you might think about it like that, is a way of interacting where we can feel what it is to speak authentically, but where also what it is to listen well actually helps that person who is speaking craft their voice. Sometimes we can be talking to each other and it's like there's just not enough time. It's like someone's going to cut over us, you know, and we feel like we have to squeeze it out. There's very little left. There's very little gap left for us to bring to completion what it is we're trying to express. Now, of course, sometimes we bring something to completion, then we add the next thing and add the next thing, and that doesn't seem to be very good from the perspective of conversation, because then it's just a monologue. We're not giving time for the other. But, you know, that's practice, really, and fundamentally what I'm hoping is that we can all speak with each other well, and that we can understand more about ourselves and the world and whatever it is we're discussing, in part by virtue of the quality of how we interact. Now, that's something to master, and it's an ongoing process. But just that key point, that the quality of our listening can actually help the other person say what they're saying. So this is not about speaking if you don't feel as though you wish to. Yeah, if you feel called to just share your attention and not speak, that's also just as welcome. So it's not pressured, but when it is time to speak, then one of the key things that I'd invite you to tune into and discern is that very process of speaking that feels right. Right? Is this something I actually do want to say? Yeah, I mean, what is calling me to speak? And we meet something pretty remarkable in that process. You know, we're crafting from potential into the actual, and it's a mysterious thing in some ways how we manage to do that. And so I don't know how much of that comes through, really. Is there anything you'd like to add there?
I would say that what's occurring here is something that's beginning to unfold all across the world in small groups just like this. There seems to be a bit of a failure from the top down to grant us much more than what seems to be propaganda. It's an enforced way of seeing the world, and it's not very participatory. So we have an opportunity here to do it a bit differently. We have an opportunity to meet each other wherever we happen to be, and to grant the space between. Sometimes that includes silence. Sometimes that includes an awkward pause. And that opportunity that we have to forgive each other for the lack of eloquence, perhaps. To forgive each other for not having answers to everything that we feel like we need to have an answer for. It's an extraordinary opportunity to co-create something that hasn't ever existed before between us, between any of us. And so what I'm doing right now, I just want to try to describe it, is I'm looking around this room and I'm trying to feel the energy of it. It's been extraordinary so far. What I've perceived, individuals that have walked through the door, the felt sense of possibility here is expanding for me. And I'm going to try to really pay attention to the nuance of that. I have no idea what I'm going to say. Not really. There's some big picture stuff. There's some aches and pains in my body. There's all sorts of weird stuff that's coming together that's going to sculpt partly what I say. And I'm sure the same is true for you. Frustrations that you've experienced throughout the day, through the week, through the month. Insights that you've had over the past however long. Things that are deeply held within us that don't often get a chance to be heard by those who can reciprocate in a way that to give us an opportunity to build and expand our place in the world and the way that we sculpt our lives together. So I'm here to hear you just as much as I'm here to speak. I happen to have a microphone here, but what I'm paying attention to isn't just the words. It's hopefully deeper than that. It's everything that I am and everything that you are, as much as I can feel into that. So I ask for your, in Tim's words, this desire to help me speak what can be spoken, to help me hear you as best as I can. And in that exchange, maybe it can spread a little further and a little deeper. That when we leave this event, when we go back to the way that we were living our lives before, that we'll be able to carry some of that with us, and it will spread as far as it can. And what comes of that is fundamentally a bit of a mystery. And I kind of like that. I like mystery. I like not knowing precisely how things will unfold, because that means others are participating in it too, and they get to add to it. And some of you are pretty amazing people. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm grateful for Tim to invite me in this opportunity, and let's keep going.
Yeah, okay. So I've spoken to some of you this evening, and I've shared a little bit about what we're going to be doing. I know it hasn't probably been super clear, so I might just say a couple things about how the night as a whole is invited to go. We're probably at, or I'm guessing, like 8:30ish now, could be a bit after. At around 9:15, we might stop here. We could stop in 5 minutes' time, see what the energy's like. But fundamentally, after we're together up here, we're going to have a break for between 15 minutes to 30 minutes. And we're going to split off into, I think we will just do 2 separate groups. And that will the room you'll be in corresponds to the token that you should have received. If you haven't, we'll figure it out in between. And that will be the forum where it's not going to be lights on, cameras on like this. It's just, because this kind of does get in the way a little bit, right? And that is necessary for now, but maybe not in half a second. We'll see. But I still think, is there something here to say? I think yes. I would like to share a little bit about what Voicecraft is as a project, because I know some of you aren't familiar with it, and it's rooted in a dedication that is also, well, it's a dedication that in part touches on an aspiration to join together in understanding what's taking place in the world at the moment and how we might like to live together. It doesn't necessarily mean us here have to live together, although some of us are already living together, in various ways. But it does mean that the kind of relationships that are invited here are ones that are open to the sincerity of discerning together how we actually do want to live. Yeah. The name of this event was is Culture and the Meaning of Life, and I mainly titled it that because it's something broad, and it's something that in the context of channels of communication like Facebook, like Meetup, well, that seems like there's some meaningful things. The meaning of life, right? That's a meaningful topic. And culture, that's this big thing we're kind of in, and that kind of matters too. But this isn't about like defining precisely or trying to propagandize in any way one particular definition of what culture is or how it should be. Nor is this about figuring out what the meaning of life is. But meaning is, right? To the degree that we're communicating well here, to the degree that we're aware in the process of discerning the qualities of existence that is meaningful. Some people speak about meaning as being in the relationship between the values that matter to us and the purpose that we instantiate those values through. Meaning is the feeling of something like that. And so, this ain't about solving those things, but they are framings that I'm inviting us to interact from that grounding. So a question, for instance, I might ask to a group downstairs or to a person in particular, and maybe I'll ask it to Tyler right now. But what is meaningful to you in your life? And what does the context of gathering together with people where the theme of culture and the meaning of life is present, like why is that attractive to you to be part of it all?
So I would say that initially, intuitively, what is meaningful to me is what it is that cultivates life, the reason for living. There's something quite strange about this stuff that's going on all the time. Why do we do what we do? Why are you here? Why am I here? What is it that calls us forward? What is it that gives us a reason to wake up in the morning? What is it that gives us a reason to persist through incredibly difficult times? I'm a father. I have 2 children. So there's something about, it's like a twin axis of authority and love, which in some sense consists of mother and father, and the way that I relate to a sense of how it is I'm told what to do outside of myself, or how it is I tell myself what to do, and then how it is I love and nourish the self that is to do those sometimes quite difficult things. And anytime that I've reached out and I found a friend, someone that can relate to me and walk along with me in the difficulties of this life, it's increased my capacity to want to live. And it's increased my capacity to help others to want to live. And I think when I look out into the world now, I often see a lot of circumstances in the socio-political arena that don't necessarily feed that. They often feel at odds with my own participation in the way that I want to be in the world. And so rather than exist at that global level where I feel like I have no power, no participation, I want to try to collapse it as much as possible back to the people that are in front of me and get a real sense of what it is to be moved, to be nourished, and to participate in community, in family. That's what it is. And that family is, well, it's really archetypal. It's brothers and sisters, it's mothers and fathers, it's children. And so I'm here to explore what it is that we can do together in that capacity. It's not often the case that we get a chance to speak about these things with one another. Life is pretty fast-paced and asks a lot of us. So when I think of meaning, I think of probably those twin axes of authority and love, what it is that nourishes me and what it is I can trust to help me make sense of the world when I can't do it on my own.
Right. And there's a meaning of authority that has some sense that's closer to something like authorship. Yeah, so how we are impressing on the world, how we as creation are influencing the world. I mean, we're all doing that right now, to the degree that I'm in touch with facial expressions and body posture and energy, and the sentence I said just beforehand, which I can lose that too, because if you recursively, is that the right thing? And then all of a sudden, what am I doing here? And then it can be silence. And what would it be like if we were just silent for a bit together now? And it kind of depends how that silence is invited, right? Because kind of then I did it wasn't quite a good setup. It was almost just a bit quick and abrupt, and that channel of communication that's existing between us now, it's like, is that fraying maybe a little bit? Like, where is this going? Where is this going? Why are we here? What are we doing? What is it like to re-find our orientation of what it is to be here, grounded in who we are and what matters to us, right? Do we know what matters to us? Well, maybe we know a bit, maybe some of us know a lot. You know, I mean, I can share with you that this is extremely meaningful to me, because part of what I have felt and thought, seen, learned, like met through successes and failings, has led me to this point, right? To be involved with others in bringing people together. Why? Well, partly because understanding, living, isn't something we can do alone, obviously. And what is it like to be part of, there's a phrase, Zach Stein, a philosopher of education, used this once with me in conversation. I think he was referencing someone else, but an ideal communication society, something like that phrase. What would it be like to belong to a community, a culture of people that was capable of really communicating well? Yeah, so that the perspective of how we see the world, the truth that is inherent to that perspective, and the truthfulness with which we utter that perspective can be well met. Yeah, well met. Doesn't mean we've got to be objectively right about everything, and objectivity is in some sense just part of the pie. Even to talk about a pie that's to be cut is to make some sort of objective statement. Right? But then there's the taste of the pie in this case, and that would be something more subjective. Well, when we're bringing something to the table that matters to us, and we want to see that influence the world in some way, which it must in order to be part of an energetic exchange that returns something of value that can nourish us. Now we begin to talk about subjectivity and objectivity together in an interesting kind of way. And part of what is, I think, deeply unknown, that I'm hoping that over time, we continue to work on developing, is what is required, but how can we together develop and recursively realize, iterate on, and create contexts for communication, ways of communication that are actually effective at bringing together what matters to us, what matters to life, with some, let's say, more accurate understanding of what's actually going on in the world and what's required in order to participate in life in ways that are more valuable to us. That would be something like a little bit more of the objective piece. I don't really know why I'm talking about subjectivity and objectivity so much in this way. I don't think it's a particularly effective way to talk about any of this, but once you start on a flow, as I was kind of pointing out before, you're kind of on it, aren't you? And what do you do then? Well, I'm kind of inviting, in a way, some charity, a little bit of forgiveness. Do you know what I mean? This isn't about me having the answers. I'm simply just trying to model here the kind of on the cusp speaking, that's seeking to return to a center of communicating something that's valuable, something that matters, in a way that can at least extend some resonant hand that any one of you might take, step into the fold, and we can walk together. So I did say that at 9:30 we'll be splitting off into 2 groups. We'll speak for about an hour, and then at 10:30 this event will come to a close for those who would like to get home and get about their world, but we'll be sticking around for another hour and a half after that. And there'll be a room open downstairs, there's a kitchen space, there's a couch in there, and there's a table. There's also a backyard area. It's cold out there though, but welcome to go out there. And of course we can stay up here too. Music will come back on, there's some food, we got some cocoa, cacao I believe people call that actually. There's 2 ways to spell it. I've finally given in. Cacao apparently it is. And so there'll be that too. So what I'll do here is make a classic ask, which is to ask Tyler. And it's the kind of thing that we can always ask each other, I think, in the context of a healthy communication or commons. What the fuck am I on about? What did you hear that I just said there?
Okay, so cacao and cocoa are 2 different forms of the same thing, right? This is why it has a different spelling. It's to differentiate a transformation of something. So we harvest the cacao from the cacao tree, and then we do something to it. Doesn't matter what it is, but we do something to it, and it becomes cocoa. It becomes the cocoa drink. Right? We boil it or we give it sugar. And it doesn't really matter. There's some element of what occurs in that process that is occurring now. Okay, there's something which is between us. It's just speech. I'm just talking into a microphone. That's all it is. Okay, it can be articulate, it can be bumbling, it can be confused.
And that's what I'm here for, obviously.
This is a very articulate gentleman. And whatever it is that is occurring between us, we are participating in its capacity to become more sweet, more nourishing, a reason for ingesting something. There's a lot in the world that doesn't start off very tasty. It starts off in a raw form. Raw broccoli, it's not that tasty, but if you cook it and put a little butter on it, it's really nice. Raw cocoa, raw cacao, bitter, super bitter. What do you have to do to it to make it palatable? Maybe you like the bitter. Yeah, she doesn't like the bitter, so she's sticking her tongue out. There's something about what it is to receive the state of the world and to transform it into something which is more nourishing for us. And when the world exists in such a way that we don't have a good sense about how to transform it, when I'm watching television and they're just telling me how to think or what to feel or what to say, how do I transform it into something meaningful? When I'm told by politicians or corporations what it is I should like, how do I transform it into something meaningful? Am I wholly reliant upon the way the world is as it's given to me, or can I truly put my hands on it and make it into something which is more meaningful? There's an action in the world, there's a way of being in the world that gives me a chance to make it more delicious. And I don't always know what that is. But having come to a place where I find everyone has something to offer, if I grant them the opportunity, and if they grant me the opportunity, there's a felt sense, there's a shift that I'm not against things, and they're not against me, but there's a space between us where we can come to some sort of agreement. And from that place, whatever community is, or whatever life is, it's that shared responsibility. And I'm here partially because I felt that in the project that Tim started in Voicecraft. I feel that awakening in many people around the world. Doesn't matter what the name is of the group that comes together. But there's a way that we can communicate with each other and support each other and learn from each other. And so this small gathering in a random place in Melbourne is not unlike a small gathering occurring in Turkey or Florida or New York or California. And the ability to tie those things together and to really feel that locally here what is happening is similar to what is happening globally, which is a reconvening. What's our time like?
Oh, it's 8:45. Plenty of time.
Plenty of time, so I can ramble forever. Just give me body language, right? Like, glare at me if I'm stop making sense. This is something I'm going to keep inviting each of us to do, and I hope that you are continually inviting me to do, is to communicate energetically somehow whether or not what we're doing is nourishing each other, right? Because I can ramble all night long.
It's such a subtle one, this nourishing thing. That's so we don't really know what we're doing, but we kind of do. Do you know what I mean? Like, is it appropriate that I interrupted just then? I mean, maybe, right? Because why did I? Because part of me was like, I agree, yes, that's right. And then I'm thinking of all the people that have interrupted me in the past or have given me like vibes that what I was not doing, like that what I was doing was not nourishing. And it's like, well, maybe it wasn't nourishing for them. Maybe if it was possible for us to slow down together, it would be. Maybe it was nourishing for the person I was talking to just next to them. It wasn't nourishing for them. So should they maybe not have made it all about them because there was something good going on? And do you know what I mean? Like, so the subtlety of the modulation of what is good here, like of how to actually come together, and over the coming months, for those of you who are wanting to return, there's ways to track this online. Certainly have the intention of gathering again together, unless they lock us down again, which, we met online, and that wouldn't have happened unless we got locked down. That would be a crazy sacrifice to make if I could go back in time and not know you, but I still but no lockdown. I mean, there'd be a tragedy both ways, eh? So, like.
Thank you for saying so.
Yeah, I mean, there's something that is like deeply grand that really is being invited here, and there's really no way that I can live up to that grandness. Do you know what I mean? Like let's take something like polarization. That's pretty fucked, eh? We all kind of know shit. Like, from politics on this issue to making scientific sense on this issue, when conceptions of science here are different from conceptions of science there. When epistemology of science here is different from the epistemology of science there. When there's power and incentive that corrupt what is good epistemology rightly applied here, and when the power and incentive maybe are aligned appropriately over here, I mean, there is an absolute, it can feel like a minefield, hey, to wade in potentially to talk about some of what really matters in life. Like, let's think about so something that came through the mail today. I just found out that the name of the council of this area, Moreland, is being changed, and it's being changed. And I just read the flyer, and I don't know the details, and I'm ignorant of lots of the history. But what was conveyed to me by the government of this flyer was that the government's been informed by an Aboriginal politically affiliated organisation, obviously based in some organisation of elders and that the name Moreland was racist, and that is racist because the Scottish man who was sold this land, I think back in the 18th century, he named it after his grandfather's Jamaican plantation, which had slaves. And I mean, well, if this is true, then this is a clear lineage where there was racism that now carries through and names land we're on, and it's totally understandable to me why people would want to change that. It makes total sense. But can you imagine really talking through all of that, right? To actually presence that, and to presence how to go about naming something now, and to go about presencing whether or not the various pains and traumas associated with all of this history are adequately addressed, and what would be an adequate address? What would it be like to be heard in such a context? For everyone to be heard in such a context. All I'm trying to say is that that's just one issue that's just right there. And we all know like that would be pretty difficult. Like where do those kinds of conversations happen where we feel like we can be mutually supported in seeking a deeper understanding of that? You know, I mean, and we could name so many other issues. And so part of what this project and many others hope to create is the kind of relational context, the field of participation, where the kind of things that really matter at that sort of level have a space where they can be presenced. And we can talk about them in a way that's transformative, in a way that increases our understanding, in a way where that understanding is also sort of meaningfully embodied in the world, that it's not just some conversation that means nothing at the end of the day. I mean, of course, the transformations we undergo with each other, that means something. But I'm trying to say that, well, what would it be to feel there was that, or feel that we lived in a cultural context where we were supported and where we supported each other to approach what matters in life, to approach questions of meaning in life, and to help each other through that. That's the kind of grandiosity of genuinely wanting to be part of a context that's responsive to what matters and calls for real and deep communication about. Doesn't call from like final answers from me, obviously. I'm just naming that it's been an absolute lack in my life, and seems like a lack more broadly, that we are lacking such contexts. And so partly that's what I'm inviting, that over time, we can create together. And, that's a very challenging thing. But it seems like without that, without a context for real communication, transformative communication, mutual learning is a beautiful phrase that Nora Bateson uses. A context for learning together that we belong to, that we can contribute to, and be transformed by, and through our transformation in relation to each other, be in transformative touch with the world. We know there are some powers that be that might not like that, in terms of, well, what do you mean about changing the world? Well, what do we mean about that? And that's the kind of thing we can talk about. And so I've just listed things where there's hundreds and hundreds of ongoing hours of conversation with people that are wiser than me, of more identities of perspective, of more stories that know more of so much of what I've touched on. And yet it feels like it's deeply important that those perspectives and all of us can come together. And I just repeat myself from there.
And then this is where I interrupt you and try to take over. Yeah. It's interesting to try to feel energetically what it is to catch what someone is throwing, right? And so one of the things that needs to happen is I need to be able to hear what you're saying. And what I'm hearing, what you're saying, has to do with that sometimes there are events taking place in the world and they're unrelated to my participation. They're happening without me. Things get renamed. And I was never invited to the committee that did the renaming. Or any of the committees, really, that participate in the creation of whatever Melbourne is. Now, I'm only here for a couple more weeks, and then I go back to the United States. And I have to wander those lands and try to talk with some more people about whatever it is that we can do together to carve out our own way of communicating what it is we are deeply nourished by. And that sense of not being able to participate in the construction of the world is a very powerful one. And I wonder why it is that way. And I wonder why it is that we can feel like sometimes the only voice we have is something as narrow as a vote, right? A ballot that we cast, which doesn't seem capable of conveying the way I feel about the world. It requires that I trust everything that's being said and done by someone who's in a position of power.
Right.
And so I wonder how it is that if we come together and grant each other that possibility of respect and mutual authority and the co-creation of something, what can be created? What truly can be created together? I know that there are all sorts of different ways of being. One thing you're referencing there is a socio-political landscape. But there's also something more, like I'm looking at Journey here, who's a dancer, right? And he co-creates in terms of the body, the way that art is produced by this energetic exchange of, well, it's quite complex sometimes, I'm sure, part competition, part unicity, wanting to be slightly different than the rest, but also partaking in a culture, right, that's acceptable in the sense of everyone there mutually appreciating what's occurring. How can something like that occur in the way that we live together in all these different areas? I'm really curious about that. How it is that we can create a life that's deeply worth living. And when it doesn't feel that way, what avenues do we have to try to make some change? So one of the images that came to mind while you were speaking is like standing in the waves at the beach. From time to time, yeah, every 10th wave will just wallop me, right? Smash into my face. I'll have the legs to stand for the other 9, but that 10th wave will just smash me in the face and knock me over. And that happens in a number of different areas of life. And so, like COVID, for instance, is like that 10th wave, right? I was fine prior to that. I had 9 waves of culture and 9 waves of being in the world, and I could withstand all of them. And all of a sudden, the 10th wave comes, and I was not prepared. Was not prepared at all, and I had to rely upon a number of other institutions and people to help me navigate what was unfolding that I really felt like I had no participation in. So what would it look like if we came together and, using our voice together, created a space where we are prepared for that 10th wave? Because they always come. And I don't believe that I have to have someone else tell me how to be. I really don't. I don't believe that I have to rely upon someone in some far distant place that has a title to tell me how to be. What I believe is that you and I can figure it out together. That's a belief I have. Now, can we do it? We have to prove that to ourselves. Can we do it in this room right now? Can we actually do something together which nourishes our soul, if I can use that word? I believe that. I believe it's possible. So I'm going to be listening as much as I can, because I have no idea what to say next. I really don't. I'm going to have all the things that I'm curious about and care about, but I want to know what you are curious about and care about too. And I want to know how it is together that we can unfold the future. It's a really remarkable thing that we can do that. Even though for a long time we've been engaging in a pattern where the responsibility for that has been granted to others. So here we are. And see, he caught it. There he goes.
Yeah. Well, I'm feeling that the longer I talk here, the more that will take away from time where we can all talk with each other. And so there's one final logistical, it's not a logistical thing, but there are two beautiful people, I mean there's many beautiful people here, but two in particular who will be sketching and drawing throughout the evening, and one will be in each space. They are Tom and Taryn. Tom is over here and Taryn's at the back, but I'm sure they'll introduce themselves when we break out shortly. And so that's an example of this being, voice here is present obviously, but that's not the only mode of expression there is in the world. Obviously, Tyler's mentioned journey and dancing. There's so many ways we can represent and share meaning with each other. And so while conversation is important and listening and all of that, what I hope, and certainly what I'm inviting for the evolution in this space, is that we can bring together many modes of expression. Okay? And so if you're the kind of person who prefers to communicate in other ways, you feel like there's an art form that is an art form in closer touch with the meaning you want to convey. And that's the kind of thing that over time we can seek to incorporate and to bring that together in some sort of artifact, words, drawing, and who knows what else. And that can serve as an artifact that we can see and we can read perhaps later on and get a different reflection on things. So some of you might have particular interest in philosophy, and I certainly consider philosophy to be a deeply important way, and a deeply important aspect really of who we are as beings. And in that sense, I do aspire to ground what I do in the world in a way that is, wise when it should be, and philosophy can help with that, But this isn't just about philosophy in the sense of, speaking only about philosophical issues. There are many other ways of understanding the world that have different labels, from psychology to even common sense. There's a certain intimidation that I've heard people express before when it comes to encountering philosophy. And the kind of philosophy that I'm really having in mind to invite here is it's as intimidating as we make it for ourselves. It's intimidating for me to be speaking here in some sense, and to search for the right words. But in developing a trust in myself and a trust in others that I can find those words, that I can return to that process of finding, return to that process of, here we are. What are we doing? What do I mean? What's that in there that's calling to find its expression? That's a good thing, hey? And over time we can turn that intimidation into something that's much more like returning home to friends, to family, and it's in that spirit, feeling of what I hope we can realize as philosophical together. So some of you, I know there are some people in this room who are extremely well-read and profound thinkers, and that's an awesome thing, because those people I'm thinking of are also beautiful people. And what a thing, that means that's a person, you ask them the right question, or maybe they can ask you the right question, And holy shit, that's just awesome. You know, there's some things I can learn here. But we all have perspectives to share, really. The quality of what matters to us, the curiosity that brings us here, yeah, or even the boredom, the frustration, even. Like the straight up frustration with this isn't actually what I was looking for. What would it be like to be welcome to presence? That's valuable, okay? And in this way of sharing perspectives together, we can explore together and integrate those. Now there's complexity to all of that, and at the same time, there can be a real clarity to knowing the process of when that's taking place well. And so fundamentally, I'm looking forward to moving into that process. Thank you all for listening. I'll certainly pass this over to Tyler to share any closing words he would like to. Thank you to those who have watched or listened to this. I wonder what you're making of it. I mean, I wonder what I'm going to make of it when I watch it, if I do with you. Because there's a number of worlds coming together here, and Tyler and I and us all together are trying to realize what's right for this collection of people. Because this is truly a collection of people some who have a knowledgeable sense of, for instance, who we happen to be, because we've shared literally hundreds of hours of conversation together, and deep dedications, and all manner of topics, hey? And there are some who are meeting for the first time, I know there's one of you who was invited here by a friend, and your friend got ill and couldn't come, and there you go, and now you're here, right? So but we're all people fundamentally. Obviously, I hope. We'll see. And then we'll be doing something slightly different. Who knows? Maybe not. I mean, in principle, there's something about the nature of what life is, hey? The nature of intelligibility itself. Is it limited to just the human form? Or limited to what we currently conceive of as human, conceive of as the appropriate human way to be in this present culture? In some sense, there is a boundary that is to be in relationship with here. There's also something to return to, which I've tried to return to again and again in my expression, and that's a return to a quality of treatment within a certain courage and a care and a trust we can cultivate in our own nature, that we can also feel in others and feel in the quality of how we relate to others, and we can return and help each other re-find that flow, and it's always available. It's always available. It's right there. A bit performative, obviously, some silence and whatever else, but we can forget what we say. I'm sure we'll say things that, that's not quite right. It doesn't matter. What matters is a return to responding to what is. So, looking forward to what comes next. So, Tyler, some closing words.
Well, let's begin with what is, shall we? What is it that we share? Where can we say absolutely that we agree? It seems to me that we're all living. We're all present. So maybe I could invite us all to, if you're willing, close your eyes for just a few moments. And remove the vision that we have together. I'm going to do it too. My eyes are closed. I hope you trust me. I trust that your eyes are closed if you want to participate. And turn your attention to your body, to the gift of what it is to be alive, to have the ability to move, to speak, to feel, to be. And try to feel a sense of gratitude for that we have this opportunity to share together. At the very least, that we are living. And briefly consider all those who have come before you. Try, if you can, to sense the lineage of living tissue that's brought you to the point where you are now. An unbroken chain. for who knows how long. Billions of years at least by some counts. And here you are in this room. And you have feet and legs, a torso, arms, a head, a heart continuously pumping fuel through your body. This we share. We can say this with a kind of confidence. Where do we begin to disagree? Why do we disagree? What is it that we disagree about? Where do we agree? It all sits on top of this shared common experience of living. So with this body of ours, and the gratitude that I feel personally for this opportunity, I invite us all to move forward and really trust that everyone who came to this space is willing to lift each other up to a place where we can hear each other. We can grant that common experience. We can wrestle with each other to understand more and deeper what it is that we're doing here together. Not based on only the narratives that have been given to us, that serve those outside of this room, but for the deep, common experience we have while we are together. And from that place, what can come? It's extraordinary, the sense of possibility that I feel sometimes when I return to just the gratitude of that common experience. And there it is. So, open your eyes and look around whenever you're ready. Let's try to sit together and do what we can while we have this time. And if we fail to do anything spectacular, that's okay too. Grandiosity is one way of being, but so is the mundane. So is doing the dishes, taking out the trash, planting the seeds, harvesting whatever it is we're growing.
Sounds grand to me. Sounds grand to me. All right. I don't think I'm just going to, and here we are. We're just people in a room. All right.
There you go.
So thank you, everybody.